He thought it was just another quiet afternoon. But when a war veteran heard a faint cry from a locked SUV, everything changed. What he found inside wasn't just a child on the edge of death. It was the beginning of a journey that would unravel secrets, expose lies, and awaken something he thought he'd lost forever. This isn't just a rescue story. It's what happens when a broken man chooses to stay. Before we begin, tap that like button, subscribe if you haven't already, and hit the bell so you don't miss the stories that'll wreck and rebuild your heart one paw print at a time. Chapter 1. The Wanderer Returns. The sun over Chandler, Arizona didn't shine, it scorched. It spilled down like molten brass on the faded rooftops and cracked pavement, seeping into the bones of the old desert suburb. Dust hovered motionless in the air, as if time had decided to slow its breath. It was the kind of heat that kept secrets buried deep, unless something or someone stirred them. Wyatt Graves stepped out of a rust-colored pickup that had seen more wars than peace its engine, wheezing one final cough before falling silent. He stood still for a moment, surveying the small one-story home that now belonged to him. His body was lean, tall, and weathered like a leather map stretched across muscle and memory. A fading tattoo peeked beneath the edge of his sleeve, coordinates inked in haste during a tour in Kabul. His eyes, the color of ironwood bark, scanned the empty cul-de-sac with the alertness of a man who never quite left the battlefield. His left hand trembled slightly before he slid it into his pocket. The tremor wasn't from age or fatigue, but a ghost called PTSD that followed him like a shadow only he could see. Next to him, jumping from the truck bed with a grunt, was Barrow, a 4-year-old German shepherd with storm gray fur streaked with cinnamon across his haunches. His left ear was nicked from a roadside blast, and a thin white scar split his right brow like a lightning bolt. Yet, his amber eyes were clear and loyal, scanning the same street Wyatt did as if to say, "We're not alone, are we?" Barrow was no ordinary dog. He had served as a tactical K9 with Wyatt during their third and final tour. But more than a comrade, Barrow had become Wyatt's tether back to earth whenever his mind strayed into the sandstorms of memory. The house was small, 1 bedroom, 1 bath, and a backyard full of sand and dry promise. To Wyatt, it was enough. No wife, no children, and no one left to disappoint. He didn't come back to be found. He came to disappear. But Chandler, Arizona, despite its cracked sidewalks and aging fences, was not a place where people stayed invisible for long. Across the street from behind dusty curtains of a yellowing Craftsman, home Loretta McGinnis watched the new arrival like a hawk from her perch. She was 75, still wiry and sharp, despite the hunched curve of her back and the cane she leaned on when restocking the candy aisle of her tiny corner store. Loretta was the kind of woman who wore her late husband's flannel shirt every Sunday and talked to hummingbirds while watering her petunias. Life had rubbed her edges raw. She'd lost a son to a car crash when he was 22, a wound that never fully closed. Since then, she had softened toward anyone who looked like they carried sorrow quietly. And Wyatt Graves looked like sorrow dressed in denim. At night, she began noticing lights flickering in his house at odd hours. Sometimes 2 a.m., sometimes closer to dawn. Then came the noises, muffled shouts, objects knocking over the low, frantic barking of a dog trying to wake someone from something deeper than sleep. Barrow had taken up station outside Wyatt's bedroom door. Each time Wyatt cried out, Barrow would claw at the door not violently, but persistently, until Wyatt snapped awake, heart racing, drenched in sweat. Every time he awoke, he looked down, and there was Barrow, silent, watching, grounding. Wyatt started sleeping with the bedroom door open. One morning, a small package sat on his front step. Inside was a sandwich wrapped in wax paper, a handwritten note that read simply, "Nobody sleeps well forever. Let the morning find you. LM." There was no name, but Wyatt knew. He didn't eat the sandwich that day, but he didn't throw it away either. The next evening, he found a bowl of fresh water by the gate, just the right height for Barrow. And this time, a second note. Some companions serve more than once. I see him. He's still serving. Wyatt placed his hand on Barrow's head that night longer than usual. The heat continued to press down on Chandler. Summer here was relentless, unforgiving, a metaphor Wyatt could taste in his mouth. But there was something strange about the way the sunsets painted the desert horizon, a brief, breathtaking blaze before nightfall. And in that moment, standing in his small kitchen with Barrow at his feet, and the orange sky leaking through the blinds, Wyatt asked himself, what kind of town lets you rest when you don't deserve peace? Chandler had always been the kind of place people passed through, a town of second chances and silent understandings. It didn't ask questions you weren't ready to answer, but it listened. Late one night, Wyatt jolted upright again, another dream, another explosion. He panted, eyes wild, reaching for a rifle that wasn't there. But Barrow was. This time, the dog didn't bark. He simply placed his front paws on the bed, looked directly at Wyatt, and let out a single low whine. Wyatt pressed his forehead to the dog's. "Still here, huh?" he whispered. Barrow blinked slowly, his weight steady against the frame. Something shifted that night. Not dramatically. Not like in movies where people suddenly cry and are healed. It was quieter than that. A surrender. A man who had carried too much letting a little of it drop just for a moment into the silence between them. The next morning, Wyatt opened the front door and sat on the steps. Not because he needed air, but because he wanted to see what the world looked like in early morning. Across the street, Loretta pretended not to notice, but she smiled into her teacup. The wanderer had returned. He just hadn't realized yet that this place, this desert town of forgotten corners and dusty grace, wasn't just a hiding place. It might be home. Chandler, Arizona didn't believe in gentle summers. It was early July, and the heat came not in waves, but in sheets coating every surface, every breath. The sky was an uninterrupted dome of white blue, and the parking lot of Desert Ridge Market shimmered like a war zone made of asphalt. Wyatt Graves parked his aging pickup in the furthest corner, as he always did. Avoid the crowd, avoid attention. He opened the door for Barrow, who leapt out with practiced ease, his paws silent on the burning pavement. Barrow, a 4-year-old German shepherd with a hawk's vigilance, looked to Wyatt for instruction. His fur glistened with a fresh brush, but his expression, always alert, carried the weight of too many missions. Wyatt clipped the leash and walked toward the sliding glass doors of the grocery store. His movements were deliberate, measured. He didn't like shopping, didn't like being in places where the doors could trap you, where loudspeakers echoed just wrong enough to remind him of mortar warnings. But you couldn't live on black coffee and canned beans forever. As they passed the third row of vehicles, Barrow stopped, ears forward, nose twitching. "What is it?" Wyatt muttered. Barrow let out a short whine, then pulled hard toward a nearby silver SUV. The leash jerked unexpectedly. Wyatt stumbled slightly before regaining his footing. Barrow began to bark, not frantically, but in that sharp trained tone Wyatt hadn't heard since Kabul. Wyatt squinted into the windows. Tinted, light bouncing, but there, movement. No, not movement. A child. A girl, maybe 3, strapped into a car seat in the back. Her head slumped at an awkward angle, face flushed deep red, mouth open, eyes barely open. The air inside that vehicle had to be an oven-trapped heat building with every second. Wyatt's pulse spiked. He tried the door. Locked. His breath caught in his throat, but it wasn't the heat that made his hands tremble. It was the sound that wasn't there. No crying, no flailing, just stillness. Suddenly, he wasn't in Chandler anymore. He was back in the narrow alleys of Kabul, the acrid scent of burning metal in his nose, the cries of civilians echoing off bullet-pocked walls. One cry, a child's, had gone quiet too soon. The building collapsed before Wyatt could reach him. He'd buried that sound deep. But now, it clawed its way back. Barrow barked louder. Wyatt's body froze half between memory and decision. His hand hovered near the glass, but he couldn't move, couldn't breathe. A tightness seized his ribs like a vice. Around him, the world kept spinning. A car passed. Music drifted from a nearby speaker above the store entrance. 2 teenagers walked by, glancing over but uninterested. Then another sound. A familiar one. Cane tapping. Steady. Rhythmic. Loretta McGinnis, in her wide straw hat and faded floral blouse, walked slowly through the parking lot. She had come for fruit preserves on sale early bird price before the crowds, but instead paused, sensing something was wrong. She spotted Wyatt standing rigid beside the SUV. Barrow barked again. Loretta's eyes narrowed. The heat shimmered between them, but she read the tension in Wyatt's stance like a telegram. "Wyatt?" she asked, approaching cautiously. "You all right, son?" Wyatt didn't answer. He couldn't. His breath came shallow and fast. Loretta peered into the SUV. Her hand went to her mouth. "Oh, dear Lord," Wyatt finally managed a whisper. "She's not moving." His hands were shaking now, palms clammy, knees locked. "You need to do something." Loretta urged, voice soft but urgent. "You've got to help her." But Wyatt was caught in that terrible limbo between instinct and paralysis, between soldier and civilian, between the person he had been and the one the war had carved out. Barrow stopped barking and sat down beside him, looking up at Wyatt with steady, waiting eyes. This wasn't a battlefield, but it felt like one. Wyatt stared at the little girl inside the SUV. Her cheeks were crimson, tiny fingers twitching. "Do something, Graves." But instead, he stood breath-hitching, mind-spinning. Loretta took out her phone, dialed with practiced fingers, and turned away to speak to the dispatcher. Wyatt placed one hand on the hot metal of the SUV door. The skin sizzled against the heat grounding him. He looked again at Barrow, silent now, watching as if trusting him to wake up. "Just 5 more seconds, Wyatt. That's all you have to choose." The moment Wyatt's fist broke the rear window of the silver SUV, the world cracked open with it. The sound was sharp, sudden glass, surrendering under the weight of urgency, and for a second, it felt like something inside him shattered too. The memory of Kabul, of helplessness, dissolved beneath instinct and heat. Barrow let out a bark, short, commanding. Then another, and another. The dog planted himself like a wall of fur and muscle between Wyatt and the small crowd that had started forming, his tail, low body, rigid eyes fixed on every movement. His training kicked in with machine-like precision, but his loyalty pulsed with something more, an understanding deeper than command. Wyatt reached through the broken window shards of safety glass, cutting into his forearm, and fumbled for the door lock. He yanked it open and ducked inside. The heat inside the vehicle slammed into him like a furnace. His breath caught. The air was thick, heavy with the sour smell of plastic sweat, and something more terrifying, stillness. The little girl in the car seat wasn't crying. She wasn't moving. Her cheeks were 2 red lips, dry and parted. Her hair clung to her forehead in damp clumps. For a second, Wyatt feared the worst. He unbuckled her seat harness with trembling hands and lifted her out gently but urgently. She was feather light. He carried her out of the car like a relic from a world too fragile to touch. Kneeling on the pavement, he laid her on her back and checked her pulse. Faint, weak, CPR training kicked in. Tilt the head, open the airway, count compressions, give breath. 1, 2, 3. His hands moved with memory. His mind moved with dread. Beside him, Barrow shifted, growling low as someone nearby raised a phone to record. The dog lunged forward, not to bite, not to attack, but to warn. The man stepped back, wide-eyed, lowering his phone. Wyatt breathed into the girl's mouth again. She was so small, barely 3. She hadn't stirred. His heartbeat pounded in his ears like war drums. Then a gasp, not loud, not dramatic, but real. Her chest hitched, then again. Wyatt stopped, held, still stared, her fingers twitched. Barrow barked sharply, and for the first time the girl's eyelids fluttered. A breeze stirred across the lot. It didn't cool the pavement, but it felt like oxygen to Wyatt. Footsteps approached from behind, fast, efficient. Sarah Klein, paramedic 34, compact build, fiery red hair pulled into a functional braid, and freckles scattered across her sun-pink cheeks, knelt beside Wyatt. She was the kind of woman who had long since traded idealism for realism, but hadn't lost her heart in the process. Years in the field had made her sharp, and losing her younger brother to an asthma attack in a rural area gave her a deep intolerance for slow responses. She took over seamlessly, checking the child's vitals. "She's stable," she said. "You bought her time." Wyatt didn't answer. He simply moved back, hands bloodied and shaking. The pain from the cuts was distant. He looked at Barrow, who now stood quietly at his side, gaze fixed on the girl. Then Loretta stepped forward. She had filmed the moment Barrow barked and Wyatt broke the glass. But she never once pointed the camera at Wyatt's face. Now she touched his shoulder with one wrinkled hand. "I'm proud of you," she said, her voice just above a whisper. "Not because you saved her, but because you moved." Wyatt gave a small, almost imperceptible nod. Later that night, the world began to turn in a way Wyatt hadn't expected. Loretta posted the video. The caption was simple. "A child was saved today. By a dog who refused to be ignored." She kept Wyatt's name out of it as promised. But Barrow's face-alert, fierce, determined became an online symbol almost overnight. The video went viral. Comments poured in. Hero dog. That shepherd deserves a medal. Imagine what kind of soldier trained him. Wyatt read none of them. He sat on the floor of his living room, with the lights off, a damp rag around his forearm, and Barrow curled at his feet. He'd bandaged the cuts himself. They didn't need stitches, just care. A soft knock on the door came around 9 p.m. Wyatt opened it slowly, shirtless and wary. A woman stood there clutching a pink stuffed elephant. Her eyes were red and swollen, face pale under layers of dried sweat. Claire Montrose was 35, with wiry dark hair that once held volume, but now clung to her scalp like wet moss. Her shoulders were hunched not from physical weight, but emotional collapse. She had come from the hospital. Her daughter Hazel was stable now, breathing, awake, confused, alive. "I didn't mean to," Claire said before Wyatt could speak. "My mom was in the ER. She collapsed at the nursing home. I got the call and just ran. I didn't think I'd be gone more than 5 minutes. I thought she'd be safe locked in the car with the windows up. I didn't think—" She stopped, breath hitching. "I know what people are saying online," she added. "Some think I'm a monster. Others defend me, but none of them were there." Wyatt looked at her for a long moment, then stepped aside and let her in. She knelt on the floor and held the pink elephant out to Barrow. "This belongs to her. I think he should have it for now." Barrow sniffed it once, then rested his chin on the toy. Claire didn't cry. She'd done enough of that already. But her voice cracked when she whispered, "Thank you." Wyatt replied simply. He barked. I listened. The night after Hazel was saved, Wyatt dreamed, but not of war. It wasn't Kabul or gunfire or buildings crumbling behind his eyelids. It was quieter now. The usual suffocating heat of memory had eased into something like breath. He dreamed of footsteps across hot pavement, of the weight of a child's body in his arms, of Barrow barking not at danger, but into silence. When he woke, it was 5:17 a.m., and for the first time in months, Barrow was not standing at the foot of the bed, watching. He was sprawled on the rug paws, twitching in his own sleep. Peaceful. Wyatt sat up slowly, unsure if the absence of barking was relief or disquiet. The fan overhead spun in lazy circles. The desert wind outside whispered against the windows, and for once, it didn't sound like gunfire. Later that morning, Wyatt walked Barrow past Loretta's home. The curtains were open. Petunias bloomed defiantly along the front porch in small clay pots. On the porch itself sat a boy, cross-legged and still with a half-finished jigsaw puzzle at his feet. He was maybe 10 years old, with ash-blonde hair and large, expressive eyes that didn't quite meet Wyatt's. This was Jamie. Jamie was Loretta's grandson, quiet as glass, with the kind of stillness most children never learned. He was tall for his age, but thin arms held slightly close to his torso, as if protecting an invisible layer. He wore noise-canceling headphones, not plugged into anything more like armor than accessory. Barrow paused, sniffing the air, then padded toward the boy. Jamie didn't flinch. In fact, he looked straight at the dog and without a word tapped the wooden porch beside him. Barrow climbed up, turned once in a circle, and laid down. Wyatt blinked. Jamie reached out and ran his fingers gently along Barrow's back. The dog didn't move, but his tail thumped once, then again. Wyatt approached slowly. "He doesn't usually let people touch him like that," Wyatt said quietly. Jamie didn't respond. He kept his eyes on Barrow, then, after a pause, said softly, "He's not people." It was the first voice Wyatt had heard from the boy, and the way he said it was not dismissive but reverent, as though Barrow was something beyond human. Maybe he was. From the screen door, Loretta stepped out, wiping her hands on a dish towel. She was in her usual uniform denim apron, over a light blue blouse, her cane tapping gently as she walked. "He likes animals more than people," she explained. "Can't say I blame him." She poured lemonade from a sweating glass pitcher into 2 plastic cups, handed one to Wyatt. "Thank you for yesterday," she said simply. Wyatt looked at the boy, then back at her. "That video, it's bigger than you meant it to be." Loretta shrugged. "I just wanted people to know. And maybe to think next time they leave a kid in a car." She sipped, then gave Wyatt a sharp, measuring look. "You ever consider working again?" He stiffened. "You offering a military contract?" "Not unless grocery inventory is classified," she shot back. Her smile softened the sarcasm. "I need someone part-time at the shop, Just mornings, stocking light repair. Most kids don't last a week, too distracted. You well, you've seen things. Maybe you could help me see things I miss. Wyatt hesitated. Nothing fancy, she added. And I'll pay in more than lemonade. Wyatt chuckled, a sound that felt unfamiliar leaving his throat. I'll think about it, he said. Over the next few days, Chandler began to respond to Wyatt in new ways. A barista gave him free coffee. An older couple left a handwritten note taped to his windshield. Thank you, whoever you are. You saved a life. Barrow, of course, received most of the praise. People called him the dog who barked life. Someone even offered to make him an Instagram account. Wyatt declined. At night, the house remained quiet. Barrow slept deeper now, no longer pacing the hallway or pawing at the door. And Wyatt, he began to sleep longer too. The dreams didn't vanish, but they softened. When they came, they brought not screams, but echoes. One morning, as Wyatt helped Loretta stack canned tomatoes at her shop, a place that smelled faintly of cinnamon and aging linoleum, Jamie walked in without his headphones. He wandered to the dog biscuit aisle where Barrow was laying in front of a shelf, chewing on a dried bone. Wyatt watched as Jamie knelt beside him, head tilting. Do you think he knows? Jamie asked quietly. Knows what? That he saved someone? Wyatt paused. I think he knows she was in danger, and I think he knew no one else was moving. So he barked. Jamie nodded. I wish I could bark like that, when things are wrong. Loretta turned from the register, her eyes moist. Well, she said, clearing her throat, lucky for us, we've got a bark loud enough for all of us. The community center was plain, almost too plain white stucco walls, fluorescent lighting that buzzed faintly overhead, and chairs arranged in an imperfect circle on a linoleum floor that smelled faintly of old mop water and coffee. Wyatt sat near the edge of the circle close to the exit. Barrow lay sprawled at his feet, tail still ears. Alert, one eye half closed, but tracking every movement in the room. He was the only dog allowed in the group, technically an emotional support animal. But to Wyatt, Barrow was more like the final barrier between collapse and survival. Wyatt's hands rested on his knees, knuckles pale, jaw tight. He hadn't spoken yet. He wasn't sure why he had come. The room wasn't crowded, but full enough. Most of the chairs were taken by men and a few women, each carrying invisible stories in their posture, in the way their eyes flicked toward the floor, in how they sometimes flinched when the door creaked open. The facilitator was a woman named June Callahan, mid-40s, short and broad-shouldered, with tightly coiled hair pulled into a bun, and a voice that carried the soft, steady weight of someone who'd seen grief in all its colors. She didn't push. She didn't prod. She waited patiently, like a river smoothing stone. Sitting across from Wyatt was a man in his late 30s, thick-built with a shaved head and a thin silver ring in one ear. His name was Marcus Vale, and he had the posture of a man who had once stood at attention too many times, and now leaned forward like the world was something he had to confront at every second. I had a good week, Marcus said, voice low but firm. Better than most. My daughter made me pancakes yesterday. They were terrible, raw in the middle, but I ate everyone. A small ripple of laughter moved through the circle. Even Wyatt cracked half a smile. June nodded. That's a win. Marcus exhaled. Yeah. A big one. After a pause, June looked at Wyatt. Would you like to share? The silence that followed was cavernous. Wyatt stared at the floor, then at Barrow, then back at his own hands. I wasn't going to come, he said finally, voice rough with disuse. Didn't think I needed to? Still not sure I do. He paused. Everyone waited. But last week he continued. I found a girl. Locked in a car. She was unconscious, maybe dying. I broke the window, pulled her out. Did CPR. She lived. The room stayed still reverent. I didn't think, just acted. But afterward, after she started breathing, I didn't feel relief. I felt like something cracked open. And it didn't bleed. It just let light in. Barrow shifted slightly, pressing his head closer to Wyatt's boot. I think Wyatt took a breath, swallowed. I think it was the first time I didn't hate myself in years. Someone across the room wiped their eyes discreetly. June didn't speak. She just nodded, eyes shining, lips pressed in understanding. Marcus leaned forward. Do you believe in second chances? Wyatt considered the question carefully. I believe in the chance to stop running, he said. After the session, most of the group lingered, sharing coffee and silent nods. Marcus approached Wyatt near the back wall, hands in his pockets, stance casual but intentional. "You've got a hell of a dog," Marcus said. Wyatt glanced at Barrow, who now sat between them, tail tapping gently. "He saved me more than once." "I believe it," Marcus replied. "I saw the video. That girl, she's got a hell of a story now." Wyatt didn't answer. Marcus looked down as if weighing something. "I've been fostering," he said after a beat. "Kids mostly. I started a year after my wife died. Figured if I couldn't fix myself, maybe I could help someone else." Wyatt nodded slowly. "That's brave." Marcus shrugged, more like desperate for purpose. "But that little girl from the video, Hazel Wright, her mom passed away. Internal bleeding. Didn't make it through the night." Wyatt's chest tightened. Claire Marcus nodded. "They're trying to place Hazel. No relatives came forward. She's alone." He paused. "I've already started paperwork. I want to bring her home, permanently." Wyatt looked him in the eye. "You sure know," Marcus said, "but I'm willing." Barrow brushed against Wyatt's leg. The gesture grounded him, kept him from floating away into what-ifs. "That's enough," Wyatt said. That night back at home, Wyatt sat with Barrow on the back porch. The sun was setting, painting the desert in ribbons of orange and soft gray. He poured a little water into a dish, and Barrow lapped it up without urgency. "I told the truth today," Wyatt murmured. Barrow didn't respond, just leaned his head into Wyatt's knee. "I said I didn't hate myself anymore," Wyatt added. "That wasn't for them. That was for me." For the first time, Wyatt reached down and unclipped Barrow's collar, letting it drop to the floor beside them. "You're off duty, soldier," he whispered, and Barrow, content, calm, finally free, closed his eyes and slept, not as a guard, but as a companion. The gas station at the edge of Chandler was the kind of place most people barely noticed. Two weather-beaten pumps stood beneath a canopy that buzzed under the Arizona sun, while inside a faded mural of desert flowers tried in vain to brighten the cracked stucco walls. Wyatt pulled into the lot in his pickup, planning to fill up before heading to the community center. Barrow sat in the passenger seat, tongue lolling tail, thumping gently against the upholstery. The dog had taken to car rides lately. It was new behavior, an eagerness to go anywhere, as if he too sensed Wyatt's world had started moving again. Wyatt stepped out stretching. The air was thick with heat, the kind that clung to your skin like guilt. As he grabbed the gas nozzle, he heard the screech rubber screaming against asphalt, then a metallic thud, and silence. It had come from the intersection no more than a block away. He turned just in time to see a motorcycle skid across the road, sparks trailing behind. The rider, young male unhelmeted, was flung forward, landing in a crumpled heap near the curb. Smoke began rising from the wreck, the bike hissed, leaking fuel beneath the sun. Wyatt didn't think. He dropped the nozzle, sprinted across the lot, with Barrow bolting ahead, leash trailing free. Traffic had stalled in a messy arc around the accident. Some drivers leaned out of windows, some filmed. Others just sat frozen in air-conditioned comfort. Barrow reached the center of the intersection, first barking like a siren, sharp, guttural, insistent. Cars halted, horns honked, but no one moved forward. Wyatt knelt beside the young man, checking his pulse there, faint but holding. The rider's face was scraped blood, pooling beneath his cheek, one leg twisted at an unnatural angle. He groaned, eyes fluttering open briefly. "We've got you," Wyatt said, voice low, steady. A flicker of heat flashed behind him. The bike was catching. Wyatt lifted the rider onto his shoulders in one movement, gritting his teeth against the weight and the old ache in his back. He ran boots slapping hot pavement, dragging the boy out of reach, just as flames bloomed into the air like a scream. Barrow stayed behind him, then spun in place, barking again, directing traffic with more order than the dazed civilians watching from their cars. When paramedics finally arrived, one of them, Maya Ruiz, mid-20s, short and square-shouldered, with thick black hair tied in a no-nonsense braid, greeted Wyatt with practiced urgency. Maya had joined the Chandler EMT force a year ago, driven by the loss of her brother in a highway crash. She was focused, assertive, and never hesitated. "You again," she said, recognizing Wyatt from the SUV incident weeks before. Wyatt gave a half shrug. "Can't seem to avoid trouble." She knelt to check the rider's vitals, nodding with approval. "You probably saved his life." Again. Barrow nudged Maya's hip with his nose. She looked down and smiled. "Still on duty, huh?" Across town, a different kind of chaos stirred. Loretta McGinnis had just turned the TV on when she saw the footage, a shaky cell phone clip showing a man dragging someone from a burning motorcycle, while a German Shepherd blocked traffic with furious precision. She froze. The footage cut to a talking head. Anonymous veteran saves young man from explosion. Community praises Chandler's quiet hero and his dog Barrow. The room spun. Her chest tightened. The glass of tea in her hand dropped to the floor and shattered. Jamie, who had been sitting on the living room rug organizing alphabet blocks, looked up. Grandma Loretta gasped, clutching her chest, collapsing into the armrest of her recliner. Jamie stared, eyes wide, heart pounding. Then, as if a switch flipped, he stood up, ran to the kitchen counter, and grabbed the house phone. He pressed 911. His fingers didn't shake. His voice was small but clear. "My grandma's on the floor. She's not breathing right." The dispatcher on the line asked his name. "Jamie," he said. "Jamie McGinnis. Please hurry." And then he sat beside her, just like Wyatt had taught him 3 days earlier. "You stay with her," Wyatt had said. "Crouch beside him in Loretta's kitchen and talk softly. Even if she can't talk back, she'll know you're there." So he did. Back at the gas station, the fire was out. The rider had been taken by ambulance and the crowd had begun to thin. Wyatt leaned against his truck barrow at his side, the adrenaline still tapering from his limbs. His phone rang. It was the community center. Wyatt came June Callahan's voice. "I just got word from the hospital. Loretta's been admitted. Her grandson Jamie called it in. He knew what to do." Wyatt's stomach dropped. "Is she okay?" he asked. "They think so. She had a mild heart attack." But the quick response made the difference. Wyatt exhaled, rubbing Barrow's head. That night he visited Loretta's hospital room. She lay in bed pale but alert, her eyes soft with recognition. "You again?" she whispered. "Me again?" he replied. Jamie was asleep in the chair beside her, curled like a cat, one hand still resting on the edge of her blanket. "I saw the news," Loretta said. I thought I'd lost another one." Her voice cracked. Wyatt took her hand gently. "You didn't. I never told you," she murmured. "My son. The one who died. It was a motorcycle crash. Just like today. I never talk about it. Never could. Until now." Wyatt squeezed her hand. "Sometimes we have to relive the wound before we name it." Barrow lay beneath her hospital bed, eyes closed. He didn't bark. He didn't pace. He simply stayed. The morning light crept in slow and gentle, no longer filtered through drawn blinds or blocked by the weight of fear. Wyatt Graves stood barefoot at the threshold of his home in Chandler, Arizona, door wide open, coffee in hand, Barrow sitting faithfully at his side. The breeze was warm, but not punishing, stirring the scent of creosote and dry earth. Birds stirred in the jacaranda tree across the street. The quiet no longer pressed on him like silence after a bomb. It was peace. Real peace. A week had passed since the accident near the gas station. Loretta had been released from the hospital 2 days ago, thinner and more tired than before, but still as stubborn as a mule. She had refused to move in with family in Tucson, insisting she had roots here, people who check on me, not fuss over me, she'd said with a wink toward Wyatt. Wyatt had started visiting her daily after work, sometimes just to sit on the porch and talk about nothing. Other times, Jamie would be there quiet but present, always carrying a sketchbook now. He didn't draw people but dogs. Barrow in particular, in every position, imaginable, sleeping, barking, playing, guarding. Jamie had become obsessed in the best way. "See this one?" he asked once, flipping to a page with Barrow's sketch beside a rocket ship. "He's not just a dog anymore. He's part space guardian." Wyatt had laughed genuinely. At the center where he'd once sat in silence, Wyatt now returned as a peer mentor. The Chandler Veterans Recovery Center was a modest building tucked between a dentist office and a faded laundromat, its beige exterior doing little to suggest the life it held inside. But inside it thrummed with broken voices and fragile beginnings. June Callahan had offered him the position herself. "You've walked through hell," she'd said during a post-meeting coffee in the center's back room. "And for once, you didn't come out angry. That's something the others need to see." Wyatt had hesitated. He didn't see himself as anyone's guide. But then he thought of Marcus, of Jamie, of Barrow sleeping without nightmares. "I'll try," he said. He now led 2 sessions a week, Not as a therapist, he wasn't one, but as a man who understood what the walls of your own mind could do to you. When he spoke, it wasn't polished, but it was true. Raw truths have a weight all their own. Between sessions and mornings at Loretta's shop, Wyatt began training Jamie in basic dog handling. It started with commands, sit, stay, come, but soon moved to deeper connections, understanding body language, eye contact, trust. Barrow was patient, gentle with Jamie, in a way he hadn't been with anyone else besides Wyatt. One afternoon, Wyatt and Jamie practiced recall in the back lot behind the shop. Jamie stood across the lot, hands shaking slightly. Barrow sat at attention. "Ready?" Wyatt asked. Jamie nodded. "Okay, Barrow. Come." Barrow hesitated half a second, then dashed across the pavement, ears, perked tongue flapping. Jamie opened his arms. Barrow barreled into him with playful force, knocking the boy into a giggling heap. Wyatt grinned. "Next week we try obstacle courses." Jamie's eyes lit up. "Can I draw them first?" "You better." Later that night, Wyatt sat by the window, watching the stars emerge above the city's soft glow. He held an old, worn photograph in his hand. 3 men in uniform, arms draped across each other's eyes, full of the kind of hope that could only come from shared survival. One of them was Wyatt. The other 2 were gone. He didn't cry anymore when he looked at them, but he spoke out loud just once to the photo. "I didn't save you, but I'm still trying." Barrow stirred at his feet, ears twitching as if he too understood. That weekend, the center hosted its first Veteran and Companion Animal Day, inviting families and therapy animals to connect. Wyatt brought Barrow, of course, but Jamie tagged along too proudly, holding Barrow's leash like a badge of honor. At one point, a young girl approached them, dark curls, shy smile, about 5 years old. She reached out to pet Barrow. Jamie knelt down beside her and whispered, "You have to let him sniff your hand first. He likes to know who you are." The girl complied. Barrow sniffed once, then licked her palm. Jamie beamed. Across the field, June watched the moment unfold. She turned to Wyatt, who stood beside her with folded arms. "You're good at this," she said. "I had a good teacher," he replied. She raised an eyebrow. "I meant Barrow," he added. They both laughed. That night back home, Wyatt left the door open again. Not just unlocked open, a symbolic invitation to the world, to light, to breath. Barrow sat at the threshold, his silhouette outlined by the warm glow inside. Wyatt joined him, sitting on the step, their shoulders nearly touching. He looked up at the sky. No helicopters, no drones, just stars. "I think we found it," he said softly. "The new sky." Barrow didn't move. He didn't have to. Sometimes the greatest miracles do not come with thunder or lightning. They come quietly in the bark of a dog, in the steady hands of a broken soldier, or in the eyes of a child who finally learns to trust. Wyatt thought his life was finished in silence and guilt. But God was not done. Through Barrow, through a town that chose to care instead of ignore, and through the small steps of healing, a new chapter was written, one filled with grace, purpose, and peace. In everyday life, we often miss the miracles because we are looking for something big. But maybe the real miracle is simply being seen, being loved, and being given one more chance. If you believe God still works through ordinary people in quiet moments, write amen in the comments. Please share this story with someone who needs encouragement. Leave a comment to let us know how this story touched you. And subscribe to our channel for more stories of faith, healing, and hope. May God bless you with small miracles that change everything.